Hello, my fellow subscribers and YouTubers. Welcome to today's review. Today I review a video game, which I was meant to review about a year ago, but I just forgot, and I'm sorry about that. But today I am going to be finishing my Uncharted reviews with Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, which is the fourth and final game of the Uncharted series, which centers around Nathan Drake, who is a modern-day version of Indiana Jones. Essentially, he is a treasure hunter going after all these artifacts and mystical objects and whatnot, and he goes up against unstoppable armies and lives a life of danger in order to do so. They did make another game of Uncharted after this, which was called The Lost Legacy, although it's more of a spin-off game, and it doesn't center around Nathan Drake. And that game is basically half the length of the other ones. I may do a sort of mini review on that one at some point, but it doesn't really, you know, it's not part of the main series. It's a side spin-off. But anyway, this is the last one. Okay, Uncharted 4 is the final game of the series. And this game was released in 2016, so that's, 5 years? 5 years after the third one, which you know, is quite a gap. But they wanted to make this the best that it could be, and essentially these games have spanned over 9 years. I mean, really, well, when you look at it. The first one was 2007, I think, and then Uncharted 2 was 2009, and 3, 2011, etc. Okay, so the basic plot of this game is as follows. It basically centers around Nathan Drake, as per usual. He is now married to Elena, who we have seen from the previous games. And they're basically living a normal life, or trying to live a normal life. And out of the blue, Nathan's long-lost brother, Sam, returns from the dead. Lol. He was presumed dead, but then it turns out he's not dead. And he makes up a load of bullshit that he has this debt to pay off, and he wants to go in search of Avery's treasure, which they had dreamed about when they were kids. Nathan is at first very reluctant to do so because he made a promise to his wife that he wasn't going to do this again, that he was going to just settle down and just live normally. However, Sam twists his arm, and he does feel like he needs to help his brother because he thinks his brother's life is on the line, although it turns out to be absolute bullshit. And they are going up against this guy who they were once in cahoots with, known as Rafe Adler. And he has teamed up with a mercenary called Nadine, who has an army called Shoreline. And they are competing against each other to go and look for the treasure of Henry Avery, who was once a pirate. So this is kind of more of a swashbuckling Uncharted adventure. And it centers around there. There's a bit more of an emotional pull to the story. Particularly with Nate and Elena, their marriage is kind of affected by what he's doing, and also Sam coming back into Nathan's life, you know, being his brother, and there's a lot sort of going on plot-wise, and they do really make the effort to tell it from an emotional point of view. And the film, obviously, not the film, sorry, that's where I can always get confused with Uncharted, because it's not a film, it's a game, but the story is good enough to be a film. And I mean, quite frankly, if it was a film released in the cinema, it would still be great, but it wouldn't be quite as good as it was as a game. But anyway, that's kind of the plot. And I mean, you know, just like the other ones, Uncharted 4 is an absolutely brilliant game. I have to be honest here. I mean, I had to play this game again to really review it for you. They have actually kept the gameplay fairly similar to the previous 3 games, although the graphics are 10 times better. I mean, wow. I mean, the other games look good, don't get me wrong. But since the first game to the 4th, there's been a real progression in quality, and it's fantastic. It really is fantastic. It looks so good. I mean, when you load the disc up in your PS4, you'll see that the graphics are so clear. They have the character designs that come up in the loading screen. And, you know, why not, Naughty Dog, show off your character designs. I mean, Nathan Drake looks so much clearer than he does in the previous games. And also, he looks older in this game. The fact that Nathan Drake is slightly older, this is set, I think, a good few years after the third one. So he has aged quite a bit, and he's not quite as sprightly as he used to be. And you will feel that when you're playing the game. You'll feel that when you're controlling him, that he's not quite as agile as he used to be. He's still pretty damn fit for what for what he is, but still, he's going a bit grayer in the sides. He's getting some sideburns, and he's approaching his his middle age, shall we say. But no, I really, really love this game. It is just, I mean, it's fantastic. It's so good. I mean, to me, this is probably the second best of the entire series. I still think Uncharted 2 is king, and that will always be my favourite. That was the first one I played, and I'm so glad I played that. But this one is great because it is a conclusion to his story, and it's an emotional wrap-up, essentially. And I love that the game takes its time to kind of, you know, be a bit slower and actually get you involved in the emotion of the story. It's almost like I am playing through a film. It does feel like that, and I'm really glad about that. Even more so than the first three. The first one was a very simple, fun adventure, very typically like an Indiana Jones, but for the modern day. But you know, this one is a much more emotional story, which I really like, and the idea of his brother coming into the story is interesting. I mean, I like the character of Sam Drake. He's interesting. I mean, it is a surprise that he was never mentioned before, but you know, nevertheless, I think he's a good character, and you can see where the two brothers are quite similar. They both have a love and a fascination for ancient history and all these old things, and you know, they've dreamed about this since they were kids, and we do actually go into their past in the game. We do get to play a couple of flashbacks, which is nice, which is really good, and it's nice to see how the brothers' relationship started and how it is, you know, now. And I think the dynamic between Sam and Nate is really good. Is really, really good. Nathan Drake himself, I mean, obviously Nolan North returns to play the character, and you know, he's just great. I mean, Nate is just the same as he was before, but he's a little bit more level-headed this time. I mean, well, certainly at points he tries to be a bit more level-headed and think about what he's doing. He's not so reckless and impulsive, but he does miss the adventure. He does miss the thrill. I mean, he gets off on all this, and that's the thing about the story, is that Nate gets off on all this adventure and everything. And that was mentioned in the previous game, the third one, when Marlowe was putting a knife to his throat, and she says, "You get off on all this," you know, and he does, and he misses it. And there's even a part of the game at the very beginning where he's in his attic and he's pretending to, you know, shoot things. You know, you actually have to control him when he's got a toy gun and he's shooting things. It's just really, it's absurd, but it's fun. It works with the story because you get his sense of, you know, depravity. He feels a bit deprived from life because he's not getting the thrill and the excitement of the adventures that he used to have. And constantly throughout this game, there are references to the previous games, which is lovely, and a nice way to tie up all four games together, which is brilliant. Another thing which this game does, which I never expected, was the whole idea of, you know, you actually get to play Crash Bandicoot in the game, so it's like a game within a game. Really clever idea. I think Naughty Dog were the people that developed the Crash Bandicoot games anyway, so that, I mean, of course they have the rights to do that. But you actually have to control Nate controlling Crash Bandicoot, which is kind of funny. You do that a couple of times in the game, but it's little quirks like that that make this game really special. But in terms of the traditional Uncharted gameplay, you get more than your fair share of that. You get there's even some new additions to the gameplay. You get to, you know, have this swinging rope, which is really good, and that's a lot of fun. You have to swing quite a few times and try and reach unquestionable heights. I mean, the amount of, you know, things that he scales in these games are amazing, and the fact that he survives a lot of things that people wouldn't, you know, is a kind of amazing, really. I mean, it is over the top, but it's impressive when you play it in the game, and you really feel the adrenaline when you do that. So yeah, the rope was really cool. Also, the sliding down things, which is really good. I like the fact that you can slide down hills and gravel and everything, and it proves to get quite intense at times. If you've got a pit below you, you have to quickly then swing the rope and then swing across to the other side. It is so much fun. And I mean, in terms of the traditional gunfire, that's all the same. I mean, that's very much similar to the first three games. So, I mean, I was fine with that because I always liked the gameplay in the first three games. I mean, the first game was a bit clunkier, but they did refine it and make it more fluid in the next two games. And this is probably as good as it's ever going to get, I think. This is as good as it's ever going to get. Also, this game does have a few more moments of stealth. They incorporate this sort of tall grass where you can sort of crouch down and then grab guys, and the stealth mechanics are really good in this game. And I think, obviously, before it was more just from, in the previous games, you would just go behind cover, you would grab the guys and bring them around the corner, or you would just go behind them and then just sort of snap their necks and stuff. Whereas this, there's a little bit more involved, which I like, that they went to the effort to kind of change it up a bit, so to speak. Also, in this game, you can actually drive vehicles, which is nice. That's a nice change from the previous ones. I mean, I know in the first game you could use the little speedboat, but you were mainly just on that shooting things and stuff, and that was very difficult to control, to be quite honest. Uncharted 2, you could get into turrets and shoot things, but you couldn't really drive the convoys, at least not to my knowledge anyway. You couldn't drive the convoys. In the third game, you could ride horses, which was good, but there wasn't really any major vehicle driving, which is good that Uncharted 4 chose to do that. And yeah, there's also long sections of the game where you are on your own, and obviously Nathan Drake is marooned. I love the opening of the game, the fact that it throws you right into the action and then goes right back to the beginning of the story. That's really good. I really like the character of Elena. I mean, she's always been a central part of the previous games, and now that she's married to Nate, it's interesting because, she actually tries to save his life. She comes halfway around the world to follow him and stop him from getting himself killed. And there's that really emotional scene where Sam, Sully, and Nate, they come back from after that massive convoy chase, which is fucking amazing, by the way, when you have to play through that. When Nathan Drake is on the floor hanging onto the rope and he's shooting things and you have to kind of pull the rope and then go on the back of the convoys. I mean, that is just spectacular. But anyway, the emotional scene that follows is phenomenal. When Elena's there and then she's like, do what you got to do, but, I'm out. I thought you were... you lied to me. You shouldn't have lied to me, and that's a great moment. And especially when she meets Sam, it's sort of a bit of unreal because he's never mentioned his brother before, so it's a little bit awkward. I mean, I like the fact that this has a lot of stake, and that his marriage is threatened. I think the story is just great. I mean, it is a usual Uncharted fun adventure, but at least they put some emotional weight behind it, which is great. Sully, it's nice to see him back, although he looks very old in this game, and you really see more wrinkles on his face. I mean, he doesn't feature a lot in the game, but when he's there, he's really good, and he does contribute to the story. I mean, you can't have an Uncharted game without Sully. I mean, come on, he's one of the funniest characters. Also, I have to mention the villains. The villains of the game are pretty good, actually. Are they the best villains? I don't know, actually, because I think the Uncharted series has always had good villains. They're definitely better villains than the villains in the first one. The villains in the first one are probably the weakest, but I still like them. I think the character of Rafe he's a real nasty piece of work. He's quite a slimeball. He's a very selfish prick, and he doesn't get on with anyone. He's very much in it for himself, and he obviously bails out Sam Drake in the hope that Sam will actually find the treasure for him, because Sam is a pirate expert, and Rafe needs that. Although Rafe is a businessman. I mean, he's not... I suppose he's slightly underwritten. I mean, he is just a businessman, but I mean, he's certainly not as scary as Lazarevich. But I mean, he's certainly a prick. Let's just say that. And he gets on people's nerves quite a lot, and he threatens people a lot. He even gets into a scuffle with Nadine as well, who's the other villain of the story. Nadine is an interesting one. She's a good character. I mean, she sort of changes heart at the end of the story. Not that she changes to the good side, but she doesn't like Rafe. she doesn't like him pushing her around, and then she fights back, and eventually she leaves him to die on the ship with Nate. And she's just like, what's the point of this all treasure? You know, people killed. You know, I don't know much about history, but people killed themselves over this treasure. You know, I'm gonna walk out while I still can. So I like that she chooses to leave while she can and leaves with her dignity. And she actually will reappear in the Lost Legacy game, which I may talk about at some stage. But yeah, I think the villains are good, and there's constant tension between the villains as well. Rafe and Nadine never always get on, which is interesting. Oh, I also forgot to mention, there is a section where you do actually take control of Sam when you're playing through a flashback sequence when he breaks out of prison. Although, I mean, in the story, the sequence turns out to be a load of bullshit. It was made up. But it was great that you actually got to take control of Sam. I mean, he plays exactly the same as Nathan Drake, but that prison break sequence was actually quite good. And I also liked the start of the story where we see Nathan Drake living it rough in prison, and obviously this is a flashback as well. There's a lot more flashbacks in the story, but they work, especially, and I especially think it's quite intense the way the game opens with Sam's, well, sort of fake death. Well, we think he's dead, but he's not actually dead. He just got shot. And there are moments where they actually just focus on the music for the emotional bits, like when Nate and Elena have their conversation and they drive off the elevator, and then the music is just playing and there's no sound, and you actually are playing the game, which is really great. And also when Drake runs away after Sam is, well, supposedly dead, you're just running, I mean, and then the screen sort of fades out when you jump in the water, and it's really powerful stuff, and amazing that they were able to do that for a video game, you know. And I love that title sequence as well in the game, which has a newer rendition of the Uncharted theme, which is okay. I mean, I prefer the original theme, but it has it's like a sketched title sequence, and it shows drawings of the previous adventures. So they are really putting the finality on this quite firm. Naughty Dog, you know, what I love about Naughty Dog is that they are so intelligent with their making of their games. They know that, you know, it's better to just quit while you're ahead, you know, quit while it's really good, rather than overstay your welcome and let it get tacky. They cannot top Uncharted 4. There is nothing else that could even come close. So why they made The Lost Legacy, I do not know. But, you know, there is no way they could have topped this. So they really did a good job at finishing at the right time. The third act of the game is a bit long, I guess you could say, but I don't mind that. It's just so much fun to play. It never feels that long to me, but the sort of the end fight where you fight Rafe, where you have the sword fight, is really good actually. And he's constantly, you know, he's mocking Nate. He's like, oh, look, the legend, you know, Nathan Drake found the lost city of El Dorado. Nathan Drake, you know, went to Shambhala. Nathan Drake found the Atlantis of the Sands and the Rubicali Desert. So he's constantly mocking him for all he's done. And now I'm going to kill him, you know, with a sword. And that final fight is really good, actually. It's not difficult. It's not really hard to do. All you're doing is pressing two buttons to dodge, you know, left and right. But it feels very cinematic, which is what I love. And the final, you know, confrontation is really good. And Rafe's death is interesting. How he gets crushed by the the treasure that's above him. I like Nate's line when he says, you know, if you want the treasure, you can have it. You know, because by the end of the I nearly said film again. See. By the end of the game, they realize that, well, Nate realizes that, you know, he doesn't want to do this anymore. He can't keep throwing his life away and chasing after these damn treasures because he's just going to get hurt, and he's going to get everyone else in his life hurt. And he tries to tell Sam that, you know, maybe, you know, we were kids once and we had this dream, but maybe it's time to move on and just go home. And obviously Sam sort of pretends to agree, and then he goes off, and then you have to go and save Sam at the end, which is the last part of the game. But still, I like the fact that this kind of, you know, changes Nate's character a bit. The fact that he's not so, you know, up for it. Because whereas the previous game, it was like, what are you trying to prove? You know, there were people that were questioning him going after all this. And in a way, Sam is kind of like how Nathan was back then. So I like the character journey of Nathan Drake, and the fact that he does actually come to realize that he's getting too old to do this, and he needs to think about packing it in now. And, you know, he doesn't care about the treasure. That's not important to him. He just wants everyone in his life safe. So I really appreciate the emotional arcs of the story here. I mean, there's a lot of the similar gameplay to before, as I've said, and you know, moments when you have to take out a tank and a truck, well, not a tank, sorry, a truck with an RPG, which is fun, as always, and then you have to run away from it, which is really good. I mean, the graphics have never looked better as well. The graphics have never looked better. It's just phenomenal. Like I said, that convoy chase is amazing. Some of the puzzles in this game, they're not actually that hard, you know, which is surprising. I mean, then again, I've played this game a couple of times. There's one where you have to climb up to this very high building, and you have to ring these bells, which is really quite fun. Just the climbing stuff is something I've always enjoyed about these games. The hardest puzzle is actually, it's not difficult what you have to do, but it's just awkward moving it. It's the one with the bucket, the water bucket. It's in chapter 9 where you have to get the bucket on the top and you have to line the crosses up into the light. That is friggin' awkward. I end up skipping that one in the end because the game lets me skip it, and it's really awkward to try and move them around. But other than that, the puzzles aren't really too bad. I mean, some of the puzzles in the third game were bloody ridiculous, how challenging they were. And then you realise how easy they are, but it's kind of amazing that they were that hard. But, I mean, and Uncharted 4, obviously, the ending is really good when you actually have an epilogue to the game where you actually get to take control of Nate and Elena's daughter, which is really, really nice. I mean, they have a daughter called Cassie. I mean, you just walk around the house and pick things up, and then she finds this cupboard where all of Nate's old stuff is, and that's a good moment where they sort of talk about his adventures and stuff. I mean, this is like years after what happened in Uncharted 4, so it's nice. The movie ends in the movie. See, I keep doing it. I keep calling it a movie. It's not a movie. The game ends in a nice way, and I like the ending of the story that Elena sets Nate up with taking over the business that he was working for. She gets to resurrect her old TV show, but he still gets to go and do some diving work and stuff. So they still get to have, they kind of get to have a compromise in terms of going out and doing stuff, but doing legal work and so so I like that. I really like that, and you know, they have a solid marriage, and you can tell that they're really in love. There's that great scene when at the beginning of the game where they're on the sofa playing the game, and then you know I mean, and also the fact that we've seen them fall in love in the past 3 games as well sort of cements that. So if you followed the Uncharted series, you'll know that these two have been very close. But it's nice that they get their happy ending, which I really appreciate. But obviously Sam parts ways, and he says he'll go off with Victor Sullivan, and then they'll go and do some other work and whatnot. But yeah, what was I going to say? One thing I will say about this game that is a little disappointing is the soundtrack. I do think the music isn't quite as good as the previous game. The Uncharted 3 soundtrack was incredible. I wish they could have reused some of that, you know. But the music is not bad, but it's not that exciting. I mean, parts of it are, but it's a little dull in comparison to the previous games, particularly the third soundtrack. But you know, I'm not going to knock it too much. There is one other feature of this game that they use, which is when you're in a conversation, you get to choose the response from Nathan Drake. You get like 2 or 3 choices until you reach the end of a conversation. That aspect of the game is kind of unnecessary. It doesn't really go anywhere. Like, they don't use it very much, so there's not a lot of point to really have it. But it's not really a major problem. It's just a nitpick, to be honest. I mean, I don't think that there's much of a problem with it. But it to me is just unnecessary. It doesn't really, you don't really need it. That's all I'll say. I mean, what can I say? Uncharted 4 is a phenomenal conclusion to this excellent series of games. I have loved playing all of these games. I own all 4 of them. I do go back to them occasionally, and this is one of the best. This is probably my second favourite of the series. For me, Uncharted 2 is just slightly more groundbreaking, but while this one is a bit more emotional, it is a more than satisfying end to this series. I mean, if you're a fan of these games, you will love this one. If you haven't played it, I urge you to play it. It is really good. It is really, really good. And, you know, it's funny how I get so invested with the characters as well. I mean, because it is a playable cinematic experience, it is like, you know, a movie. You know, it's like I've been following a series of films. You know, but of course, this is a series of games. I mean, initially on paper, the idea is a little generic, like this modern day Indiana Jones, but the fact that they did it as a game, I think, or a series of games now, is very impressive. And I think Naughty Dog should be commended, and they should be really happy with the 4 games that they've made. We'll talk about the Lost Legacy at some point, but it's not a patch on these 4 games. And Uncharted 4 for me is just a brilliant game and a fantastic conclusion to this series of games, and I will definitely be playing these games again, that's for sure. So I'm going to score Uncharted 4 A Thief's End a 10 out of 10. And that's it. That's the end of the Uncharted series of games. Well, kind of. As I said, they did make The Lost Legacy, which was a spin-off game where you actually play as Chloe Fraser, who's a character from the previous 2 games, and then Nadine is in the game as well, and they team up. I'm assuming it's set sometime after Uncharted 4, but it's about half the length of a normal game. It's only 10 chapters long, so it's not really that much of a story, but it was kind of fun, I suppose. I mean, I'll talk about it briefly at some point, but rest assured, I haven't got that one anymore. I only own the 4 main games with Nathan Drake. So yes, and I may review some other Naughty Dog games as well. I mean, I might review The Last of Us. That is a game I do want to review, especially with the second one on its way. I really want to get that second game. I really want The Last of Us 2 to be great, but we'll talk about The Last of Us at some point. But no, thank you for watching this review. And yeah, what do you think of Uncharted 4? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Please comment down below, let me know. What was your opinion on this game, and how would you rank the Uncharted games if you've played them? I haven't played the Golden Abyss one, which was the PSP one. I have only played these 4 games and Lost Legacy. So, yes, thank you very much. And I'm sorry it took so long to get to this review. But thank you very much for watching. And stay tuned for more reviews. So, thank you very much. See ya.